Now, usually I'm the one introducing you to some forgotten flick and or thing that at first you're like, I don't really want to see that.
Yeah.
But then by the end you're like, yeah. You turn into Ice Cube by the end.
I do.
But today was, in a manner of speaking, your turn. Now, of course, I've heard of this picture.
Yeah.
Who hasn't?
It's true.
Anytime Disney squirts something out, everybody hears about it somehow.
Yeah.
Even like tribes in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, it's also like a classic tale.
Yes, and that's the thing. This is a story based on something that, is considered timeless by many. And that's kind of like, the modus operandi of most Disney animated flicks. And usually they go out of their way to dramatically change the material in a way that still, doesn't offend anybody that might like that material. But I was actually kind of surprised to see how much remained from the original source material of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This was a movie that was made during, the Renaissance period of Disney, but it's also one that's kind of like divisive, as I understand
apparently.
it. I think a lot of people saw it as like a watershed moment in terms of a turn in quality, as far as I understand reception. Although, of course, it does have a quite large vocal supporting fandom as well. So take that as you will. The point is that I hadn't seen this thing. Although theoretically I should have. I've seen iterations of it before. Lon Chaney's, the John Barrymore version. Of course, as a fan of cinema, I should have, at the very least, wanted to see this, but I never did it, and I don't understand why. I don't get it. The person responsible for the original story literally wrote one of my favorite books and one of my favorite plays, and he didn't write the play, but they adapted the play from his work, and of course later adapted that play into one of my favorite musicals. And this is a musical based on
that dude.
Yeah, another one of this person's writings.
Boy.
Yeah, of course, Victor Hugo is a particular person we're talking about, legendary writer, and dead man for over a century. So
at least
it's not like he's like frowning at me in disapproval for not having seen it.
He still is. His dust is
definitely is. I didn't know really what to expect from this. I knew you liked it, but then again, you're also the guy that recommended Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from Michael Bay.
I was so worried, dude.
And then immediately realized your mistake.
I was so worried because I was recommended this by a former friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I didn't expect it to be very good because I had just seen Mulan.
Right.
And was horribly disappointed by it. I was like, man, that was a thing I saw. And then, by the way, the guy in Mulan is clearly gay because he was into her before he knew that she was a chick.
Yeah.
# gay.
Obviously gay.
Anyway.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying. Come on, guys.
Yeah. And yeah, like I had also heard that it was one of those kind of divisive ones, but when we saw it, the second it started, I was like, oh, this is badass. And it was one of those.
What was it about it that most attracted your attention?
That opening. The freaking opening song just sets the mood, in my opinion, so well.
Yeah.
And it's like super epic.
It really is, man. It's a super strong opening. It's so good an opening, and it encapsulates so much that you can't. Well, at least I did. I don't know about you, but I kind of the first time anyway. I kind of feared how it was going to go from that point forward because I was like, man, if you start off that strong, where can you go? But thankfully, it did not decrease in quality at all. What really pleased me about this particular adaptation is how much of the thematics of Hugo's work it kept. I don't think they would dare make this movie nowadays. Hugo was a very spiritual man, and it's like, it's like ingrained in his work. And this movie did not shy away from that.
Yeah.
Now there is a way to get the virtues and values represented in that certain faith can be represented without representing the faith. However, you are literally in a fucking cathedral.
Yeah.
So how are you going to avoid that? You can still, but they didn't. They didn't even try to skirt it. There's a one specific song that echoes throughout the movie and really brings forth a lot of memories in terms of a constant theme in his work. You see a lot of these themes repeated in Les Miserables, but you know the idea of people being a representative of holiness by the acts that they do for others is a very strong concept in this movie. So strong that the ending thankfully maintains something that typically Disney would not do. Typically Disney says the hero gets the girl.
Yeah.
And this managed to not fuck that up and do it the way it was supposed to do. It was not about that. It's not about that. It's about doing for others. And that was one of the big things that Hugo found so important, and that the movie actually had the nuts to not only defy the status quo of Disney and keep that, but then on top of that to keep all of this heavy spiritual thematic in the work was frankly very impressive to me. More so than anything else in the movie. That impressed me that they actually did that and didn't shy away from it, didn't skirt the issue, you know, all that stuff. Yeah. And like I said, I think nowadays they wouldn't do that.
It's kind of unfortunate because of all of the movies, this is the one I would like to see live action.
Yeah.
Because the music, I don't know, I'm sure there's been other musical adaptations of this, but the music in this is really good.
Mm-hmm.
And just seeing that and seeing certain scenes in live action would be great, like the scene where Frodo is like singing to himself.
Yeah, that was particularly impressive work. Frodo himself as a character is very interesting because usually the worlds of Hugo are populated by two extremes: the righteous and the self-righteous, and he embodies the self-righteous person to a T. You know, he thinks himself to be holy. He aspires to do things for himself and only does what things are perceived as good to save his own skin. Yeah. There is no holiness in him. There is just a corrupt individual that thinks he is holy and thinks he can judge others. So it's a scathing criticism of the very thing he's supposed to represent, and yet at the same time, here we have people that are considered outcasts of society, that are, the poor, the needy, the what would you say?
Hideously deformed.
Hideously deformed, for lack of better words. The incapacitated, what have you, that are actually embodying what it means to be holy, and that's something that the church at the time, especially, and to date, has yet to fix. And Hugo was very, as spiritual as a guy as he was, he saw these problems there. And Frollo, in the singular character as portrayed here, really got those points across incredibly well in a, for lack of better words, a kid's movie. I was surprised at how much how adult the themes remained.
Yeah,
how they could still communicate concepts to a child.
This is a G-rated movie, and it could easily be like a PG-13 because it's really dark at times.
Yeah, really, just based on
the themes and
the implications of what's being said. Yeah, exactly.
He's trying to bang her at one point, and you're like, ooh.
It's pretty amazing what they managed to put in this movie, while still keeping the Disney brand alive and not marring the original work. One exception: the gargoyles. One gargoyle, to be precise. Jason Alexander's, the mandatory Disney funny sidekick, is so out of place in this movie.
Yeah, a little bit.
Thankfully, he's hardly in the movie, but he's horribly out of place. The other two gargoyles I can live with. I would have preferred, and they kind of did, but didn't. I would have preferred if they played it as a reflection of his subconscious or his inner thoughts. They kind of played it that way because they were never really animated in front of other people, but then they were in certain circumstances. Given
it's really just that ending.
And then when they're alone, also, and Quasimodo's not in the scene, they talk among themselves. So it would have been really neat if they gave that particular, polish and just make it about his subconscious. After all, he is a lonely guy, and I think maybe at one point that might have been the case.
I think that is what it's supposed to be, but there's certain scenes that kind of break that.
Yeah, they kind of break that illusion. But really, that Jason Alexander fucking gargoyle is unnecessary. This is a movie that didn't require humor. There are moments, don't get me wrong, but it didn't require that type of humor.
Yeah.
So that is an unfortunate blight on this movie, but it's not a movie-breaking blight, thankfully. He sucks, don't get me wrong. He's bad. The other two gargoyles, perfectly fine with them.
Yeah, I even told you about that before we saw it. There's that guy, though.
A hag gargoyle.
Because the hag gargoyle is
pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's just, I understand, that they wanted to line up some of it because it is so dark at other times. Mm-hmm. But
just not that way,
George, dude.
Yeah, come on. Although he was playing poker with pigeons, so I'll grant him that much. Yeah.
And losing.
Also, man. I just really the focus of my delight with this movie is how they maintain the integrity of the character so much. It would be so easy to paint them in certain shades that wouldn't fit into Hugo's mold, but would definitely fit into the Disney mold. They just didn't. I'm surprised, dude. It really takes me aback that they had restraint.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. But anyway, tell me something either you like or don't like about the movie.
I think the animation in this is very impressive. There's scenes where, obviously it's got that very smooth. Disney was good at animation at this point, even in that janky ass shit. But it does use this kind of 2.5D effects at certain times. When he's swinging and the certain sweeping scenes that just look really nice. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that at least some of them were an early form of CG. At least it looks like it.
Yes.
But they look really good and they fit into that.
I do know that one of the points of contention some people bring up is the heavy use of CG animation, especially in terms of the backgrounds and some of the locations.
There's a couple,
but it's not like this was something new to Disney. They've been doing it, like Aladdin has that. It is noticeable, but it blends. It gives it a distinct look, for sure.
I think the only time where it looks a little bit off is in some of the crowd scenes where you'll see some people just kind of but they use it really well in other scenes where it just looks nice, big sweeping shots,
most notably in the architecture and the way they integrate the camera work into it. I'm sure that took a lot of pressure off of the standard form of animation, but man, I think it looks great. I'm not huge on the color palette of the movie. It has a really blanched, almost pastel look at times. And I'm not a fan of that, but the movie's so good that I didn't really care. You know what I'm saying? I would have preferred a darker tone to the movie. And I'm assuming they intentionally made it look lighter because there's a lot of dark themes in the movie.
They do save the darker look for the third act, when the city's on fire and shit. I like how it looks.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan of pastel looking anything, but again, it doesn't matter in the end because yes, the animation is beautiful, and ultimately the story trumps any misgivings I may have about that. And that's just subjective. That's just a preference. Character designs are particularly good. There's a fine line you got to walk with a character that's not, physically palatable to the standard audience. It's sad, but in reality, when we see someone that defies our definition of beauty, we are instinctually repelled by them. So to have the character be sympathetic and hideous at the same time is a hard line to walk.
Yeah.
And the character design does not shy away from the fact that this is not a good-looking person. But thankfully, they managed to somehow animate the character into that hideous nature. And again, I stress that's hard because with an animation you can kind of do that. It's harder to do with something in live action. Like, people have achieved it, don't get me wrong. Just off the top of my head, John Merrick in The Elephant Man is somebody that evokes great sympathy, but is clearly very hideous. It's hard to do that.
Yeah.
Animation lent a lot of help to evoking the proper feelings, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think they really did hit a good middle of. You can tell that he's supposed to be hideous, but the design is easy to look at.
Yeah. Like Lon Chaney, when he did his bit, the movie, of course, it suffers from the fact that it was the early days of cinema, so there's some things that work and don't work. But Chaney's performance really stands out. One, for his physicality. Two, for the obvious movie magic that he managed with his makeup. But he also manages to make the character sympathetic. I say all that to say this. That movie did it in a particular way. This one does it in another particular way. But this one also pays a lot of visual homage to the Chaney classic. In the way Quasimodo moves, in the way he emotes. Certain scenes are like straight out of how they were depicted in that movie. It's pretty awesome. If you're a cinema fan, that alone's like, oh, that's cool, man. They're not only tipping the hat to the source material, but tipping the hat to things that in the zeitgeist of cinema captured people's attention. So that was particularly fun to watch for me personally. P.S. Esmeralda's hot,
dude.
Right?
She's my fave. I'm not even gonna lie. She's my chick.
Do they count her as a Disney princess, or do they give her the shaft?
I mean,
she's not a princess.
I think sometimes she is.
No, they have an official list, and they have like.
Oh, there's like an official list?
Yeah, there's an official list.
That's hella corny, dude.
If you're not on the list...
Yeah, you're not that.
You're going to get shot.
Well, I count her, because damn.
Of course you count her.
Yeah.
Hashtag got a bone. But
I would be on the Quasimodo's shoes, dude. I'd be like... They'd be boning, I'd be like, oh, man.
There's a lot to digest in this movie. I do wish, as much as I would want a musical version of this, we know that Disney would be the one that would want to do that live action style. So I would much rather prefer to avoid Disney potentially nowadays not wanting to bring some of that material to life.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I would rather have somebody else do it. I say even if it's not a musical, because really, it doesn't have to be. It's not like a book was a musical, you know what I'm saying? So I would prefer somebody else to bring it to live action, unless Disney's gonna, they're eventually gonna get to
That's
it.
the thing.
Unless they have the nuts to keep the themes intact, I don't want them. This is one of the few times I don't want to see the results of a live action.
And it's unfortunate because, like I said, I think a lot of the visuals in this would be really cool.
Oh yeah.
In live action, it's just. Yeah, you don't know what they would.
And then it's almost like it's predestined to be made. Tom Hooper directed, of course, Les Miserables, which is an adaptation of Victor Hugo's novel of the same name. You'd think he'd be like, that's it. Just get that guy to do it. He's done it before with the author's work. Let's get him. But yeah, I'm scared. I don't think Disney will do it anymore. But I'm glad that they did at one point. Yeah. So that's pretty awesome, man. So let's give any final thoughts you might get out there and a final score. Give it to me.
I'm not gonna lie. I was worried, like I said, going into this.
TMNT worry.
Yeah, but the second that first note of the opening song played, I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be good again. And many a time was my spine a tingled. It just the freaking the scene that it sets, and I think Frollo is like the biggest scene stealer in this.
Mm-hmm.
His character alone is just super interesting, and his voice is badass. But he's a dickhead, so you're kind of like, man, this guy's voice is badass, but he's a dickhead. But it's just such an interesting movie, you know, like the characters are so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Jason Alexander sucks ass, but even he doesn't destroy it.
Yeah.
He does kind of like make you go wish that he wasn't in there, and there's a lot of like visual gags in this that could have brought it down. Thankfully they don't. My favorite is that old guy. But
yeah,
it's just freaking I love this movie, dude. It's freaking great. You know I don't throw that word around. But yeah, I'll give it look, I got to take a point off because Jason.
Yeah, he's not good.
So I'm going to give it a 9.
And
if it wasn't for Jace, would have been a 10.
I'll mirror that, man. This is a good ass movie. Period. The reason I'm taking a point off is, yes, I do wish the color palette was different. It would have suited the material a lot better. But that's really not the point. The point is Jason Alexander's character. Why is that guy in there, man? It sucks. But yes, gratefully he is almost like he's virtually non-existent in the movie. Really, in the grand scope of things, he's virtually not there. But the fact that he is there frustrates me a little bit. It took me by surprise at how well this is done. I did not expect it to be this good. I expected it to be good, or rather, I hoped and thought. You couldn't be wrong twice, because TMNT, dude, you fucked me with that one.
That was bad.
But I was glad to see that. In fact, you had gotten this right, and you're right. Frollo ends up being kind of the most interesting character. And that's a weird thing to say because, say, in something like Les Miserables, the most interesting character for me is Jean Valjean. He is the guy that, at the end, you aspire to be. And that's the same here with Quasimodo. You value what he values. You see the worthiness of his virtues and what he has learned. You see all that, and you like that. But there's something about Frollo and how he holds a mirror up to the majority of society that's very interesting.
How much of a asshat he is.
Yeah, really. And really it speaks loudly about, again, the majority of us. We think we're always right. We think we have it figured out. We prejudge. We assume control and power when really we shouldn't have all that. We should have humility. I think ultimately the biggest lesson comes from Frollo, which is kind of not the case with Les Miserables' villain, quote unquote. A boy Russ. There's much to be said about what his character indicates, but there's almost like a tragic side to him. Javert, the character Javert. With Frollo, there is no tragic side. He is delusional.
To the end, yeah.
Yeah, he is delusional, and he is self-righteous, and he is wicked.
Yeah, you usually get that like kind of turning point in a movie where someone regrets, but no, this dude legit rides himself to death.
And there is something fascinating about it.
And thinks he's right.
Yeah, exactly. And the fascination with that is not something like usually we do with some villainous characters that we find cool. No, there's nothing cool about Frollo.
No, he's not cool.
But
it's
it is
fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see us. Yeah. And I mean that collectively. Because no matter how well we paint ourselves, that's usually us. The majority of us lack the humility that Quasimodo has in the end. That Esmeralda shows. The kindness, that's what we lack. So it's a fascinating movie in those respects. It's very deep. And I'm glad it is, because it could have been frivolous. So yes.
Also,
Highly recommended.
I want to add also another plus that I forgot to mention.
Mm-hmm.
I like the way they approach the music in this, and I know I mentioned the music, but I mean lyrically the music, in that it's not these big catchy,
Yeah.
numbers basically. It's like a musical. It's telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
The best example being that opening.
There is a time and a moment for catchiness, in music. This was one where you could see the wise nature of keeping away from that. So yeah, you're right. It did a great service to the movie in that respect. Do I think they could have made a movie that had catchy? I mean, Les Miserables is catchy as shit through and through, but it never loses the intensity of its message.
Yeah, I think it's impressive in that it just throws that idea out the window completely.
Yeah,
it has these like major themes that are not catchy, but they stick with you. Like that big musical swell that is throughout the whole movie. But it's not like the lyrics aren't like it's not just something you're gonna hum and shit.
It's more about the actual music evoking a feeling coupled with the lyrics versus the lyrics being something that's just an earworm.
Yeah.
And there just happens to be circumstantially fucking music in the background. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, like you say, I agree with that. So anyway, if you haven't seen this movie, see it. If you have seen it and haven't dissected how meaty it is, then reevaluate it. There's a lot of substance in this. Especially, given that it's an animated film, which I know animation. If you know animation, you know that there's a lot of fantastic stuff out there. But I think a lot of people just think of animation as kid stuff.
Yeah.
And this is one of those movies that, if you see a kid's movie, which it is on one level, but if you just see a kid's movie, then what the hell's wrong with your brain?
This is one of those that I could see many kids being like, having nightmares over or something.
A little.
Because there's a lot of imagery where it's just like, damn. That being said, this pack also has a part 2, which I've never seen, and I'm really scared to.
Talk about unnecessary, man. It literally ends on a perfect note.
Yes.
And its messages are made. There is no need for a sequel. There's things that do not need a sequel.
Yeah.
This would have been one of them, but unfortunately it doesn't have one. I have zero interest in seeing it. I don't even care if it's good.
It might be good, but it's like, why even bother at that point?
Yes,
I do know Jason Alexander comes back, so
that's a reason to avoid it. Anyway, let us know what you think about this movie. If you haven't seen it. If you have seen it. If you haven't seen it, check it out and let us know later. In the meantime, hit like, share, subscribe, and those notification buttons because we're out.